In a world surrounded by idiots, why are we blindly signing contracts with each other? And if idiots sign agreements with idiots, should we really be surprised if a relationship breaks down or doesn't materialize in the way we had hoped? Human connection and rejection is complex, but the mechanics can be explained and odds of success placed in your favor. If what is outlined in this video doesn't alter your perspective for the better, even just a little, then feel free to destroy me in the comments. Knowing that all relationships operate on invisible contracts constructed by our conscious and subconscious traits, understanding the existence and origin of these contracts, the basics of this psychology, can give you an incredible edge. What may seem obvious is actually powerful knowledge because it provides a foundation for us to rethink relationships entirely. So let's start with invisible contracts. Think of them as informal agreements between two people based on their conscious and subconscious traits or quirks, all coming together in a compatibility-like value scoring system that creates a relationship as the output. Effectively, every connection you've ever made operates on an unspoken agreement, an invisible contract. These contracts are built on expectations, however many of these expectations are never communicated outwardly, and to make things even more unpredictable, they can evolve or change over time. Unsurprisingly, relationship contracts become more complicated as they move up the scale, for example work, then friendship, then romance. This is why it's common for us to have many work colleagues, fewer close friends, and only space for one romantic relationship. Unlike the explicit nature of closed contracts you have with an employer, with a physical contract, a start date and an end date, and the terms completely spelled out, invisible relationship contracts are completely open, and this is where the chaos begins. Open contracts have no end date and no explicitly defined terms. Some examples of these invisible open contracts could be a friendship, work colleagues, business partnership, girlfriend, boyfriend, a fling, affair, marriage, an open relationship, friends with benefits, and one night stands. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, especially in today's wild world. As we enter these kind of contracts, we are both personally and separately defining them, but, and this is an important but, never collectively and explicitly. All relationship contracts rely on assumptions, and more often than not an element of wishful thinking. The problem, assumption is the mother of all ups. The reality is, in most cases, you're working off entirely different versions of the contract, even when you think that you're on the same page. And that disconnect is what causes heartbreak and resentment after those awkward we need to talk moments. So why do open contracts fail, and moreover, why are they so necessary? Well, they thrive on ambiguity, and that ambiguity is a double-edged sword. They're undefined, which means they can grow, evolve, but also implode spectacularly. All of this is because the terms of the contract are left vague and open-ended. In this respect, open contracts are pure landmines. One person might think they're building a future, while the other is mentally swiping on Tinder during dinner. Many people operate on the illusion of foreverness, believing in the moment that their partner will always meet their needs, and vice versa. But what happens when the terms of the contract shift? What if one person evolves and the other doesn't? Or where Father Time naturally reveals more about a person's traits, leading to a change in value? Open contracts in relationships are super necessary as they provide the perfect conditions of uncertainty that's required for the possibility of a bright future. And it's because the full terms are unspoken that when these contracts implode, it feels personal, but the ambiguity is baked into the system. It's what formed the relationship in the first place. Open contracts are fragile, but without them, relationships would be rigid, lifeless, and in many respects, pointless. No longer an adventure or exciting journey, but just a boring, predictable process. The thing that makes relationships beautiful and flourish, their unpredictability, is also what makes them so damn painful when they break down. So we've established that in all forms of relationships we're signing invisible contracts. These contracts are open-ended with the terms undefined, but what is the phenomena forming these contracts in the first place? What is it that builds the initial attraction and creates a bond? Think of everyone you know as a stack of traits, features and quirks that reside in both the conscious and subconscious, public and private domain. This forms the layers of the individual, their personality, values, habits, physical appearance, conscious, subconscious desires. All of this is what creates attraction. It's these traits that determine the terms of the contracts. Different relationships require different traits, and they also vary considerably from person to person. There are no absolutes when it comes to the specific traits required in forming any type of relationship. Here are some examples we might typically associate with the different types of relationship traits. For romantic relationships, we might think of things like sex, psychological or personality type, politics, whether they're an introvert or extrovert, age, BMI, income, spoken languages, or intelligence. For non-romantic friendships, things like interests or hobbies, reliability or generosity comes into play. And for work relationships, things like your capabilities, reliability, work rate, output, and experience. This is not an exhaustive list. In fact, the features, traits, or possible quirks of an individual are limitless, as one can hold any number of them and also have extremely varied preferences for entering any relationship contract. What you will find is that many traits cross over to different relationship types. Generally, as you go up the scale, being work, friendship, then romantic, the number of possible traits and significance of them in terms of defining the relationship increases. For example, in the workplace, your employer doesn't care about your religion, social status, or looks. The traits they're looking for are more clearly defined and obvious for this type of relationship. But romantic relationships, now you're dealing with a never-ending checklist of conscious and subconscious features. Even random things like your laugh or how you say certain words can influence attraction and lead to relationships. No matter how deep or superficial, the spectrum of these features or traits could be infinite. The brutal truth, you're a checklist for the relationships you pursue, as are the people you are pursuing. And the selection process is savage. People don't want most of what you offer, they want specific traits, often in specific combinations, that in many cases are personal to the individual's own quirks. If you're missing just one crucial trait from someone's subconscious checklist, then it's highly probable it's not going to work out, even if on paper everything seems to have aligned in the short term. And just because we don't communicate a feature, trait, or quirk doesn't mean it does not exist. It's predominantly the subconscious part of your brain that's quietly running the show while you think you're in control. People don't communicate all features up front, sometimes intentionally, but also naturally. Many of these quirks remain in the background or the subconscious, either to be revealed over time or never at all. Effectively, it's subconscious sabotage. The real villain in all of this is your subconscious. It's like a toddler with a crayon. It doesn't care about logic, compatibility, or what's good for you. It's just scribbling all over the walls of your life. Psychological studies show that much of our attraction to others isn't based on conscious choices, but on deeply ingrained, often irrational preferences. Maybe it's the way they laugh, their scent, or even their posture. These little quirks bypass your logical brain and can hit you right in the feels. This is why you can't rationalize your way into or out of attraction. You can't just tell yourself she's perfect for me on paper if she doesn't meet some deeply buried criteria in your subconscious. And even if you think you're choosing partners based on logic, you're still a prisoner of your subconscious wiring. It's the subconscious features or traits that create this kind of soul-level compatibility. Based on this complexity and its ever-changing nature, should you ever be surprised when a person breaks an open contract? Now, what I'm about to share with you is probably the most valuable nugget of information in the entire video. When it comes to the features or traits that form the layers of an individual that feeds into our relationship contracts, none are more impactful than the 4 well-known psychological or personality types commonly categorized under the 4 colors: blue, red, green, and yellow. Our personality type plays a pivotal role in us forming all kinds of relationships due to the number of subtraits that come from these psychological types and how they display varying degrees of compatibility with one another. Again, the traits or behaviors associated with these personality types are found in both the conscious and subconscious. Different psychological or personality profiles might expect different contract terms for the same type of relationship. For those unfamiliar, here's an overview of the 4 colors personality types. For reds, we see dominant, driven, results-orientated; blues, analytical, detailed focus and structured; greens, harmonious, people-focused and cooperative; and yellows, creative, social and energetic. Personality profiling dominates when it comes to compatibility, therefore it's not only useful to find out your own psychological type, tests for which can be found online, it's well worth researching and understanding them all to benefit how you approach all the relationships in your life. The book Surrounded by Idiots does a great job in defining the characteristics and behaviors of the different types, and this is also the inspiration for my idiots reference at the start of the video. When it comes to relationships, too much focus is spent on the differences between men and women rather than the real driver of compatibility being the difference in personality type. We'll be delving much deeper into the 4 colors as the series on Mateology evolves, but in the meantime, I highly recommend the material linked in the comments below if you really want to start the journey of rethinking relationships. So what about the relationship rating system? It's the conscious and subconscious features, traits, and quirks of an individual that drives the rating or value system governing all of this. This is where relationships become a game, and games are not necessarily trivial. In fact, they're often played at very high stakes. In relationships, because the value is unclear on both sides, it means it can change over time. It's not fixed or an easily identifiable figure, but an ever-changing value, for better or worse. The scoring system that dictates the value is complicated because for each person's score there is a private and public part. For the public part, this is societal norms, how people are generally branded beautiful, for example. However, it's largely the private part of the scoring system driving relationships, not societal norms. And to make things even more complicated, this also is split into a private and public part. Public being the traits or preferences that are conscious to you, and private, the subconscious traits or quirks you don't even realize you value or possess. This is why your initial perception could be a 7, for example, but as you dig deeper, you notice quirks that either reduce or increase the value that you see. This could be a crude way of explaining how people fall in and out of love, grow apart, and move on. Value is an ever-changing piece of the relationship puzzle, so can human connections and value be defined on a simple 1 through 10 rating? Have you ever looked at a couple and thought, how the hell did they end up together? Maybe you've judged someone for dating beneath their league. Newsflash, you're not seeing the full picture. As highlighted, subconscious cues like someone's voice, scent, or even the way they laugh can trigger attraction without you even realizing it. So in the 10 dating of 4 scenario, to you the 4 looks average, but to their partner, they're a 10 because they meet subconscious preferences that you can't see. This invisible thread of compatibility can feel like fate or destiny to those experiencing it together, increasing the value in their subconscious scoring system. People enter into relationship contracts based on these features or traits, creating a kind of soul-level compatibility scoring. This completely destroys the idea of leagues or someone being out of your league. Attraction isn't a simple math equation, it's a complex algorithm running silently in the background of your brain. This means that even people in relationships might not fully understand why it works. That's the power of the subconscious. It's brutal, blind, and beautiful. So if we're to recap, it's our conscious and subconscious traits that creates a personal profile and preferences. This phenomena leads us to establishing undefined, invisible, open contracts in the form of relationships governed by a complex value system that has the power to make, strengthen, and break the bond over time. I guess the phrase, "it's not you, it's me," seems to be more accurately described as, "it is you, because of me." Looking at relationships through this lens doesn't fix the pain or turn back time for the mistakes of a bygone era. It provides an explanation to how they are formed and why in some cases they break down. Approaching them with this mindset and adjusting your outlook in this way is extremely powerful because it provides us the very foundation needed to rethink relationships in general.